A 6-ton stone was carried over 700 kilometers across ancient Britain. No wheels, no engines, no cranes. Just human hands, ropes, and a level of organized planning that nobody thought was possible 5,000 years ago. And scientists just proved it. That single discovery, confirmed in a peer-reviewed journal just weeks ago, is forcing the entire scientific world to rethink everything it thought it knew about Stonehenge. Not the myths, not the legends. The actual hard science. Because what modern technology is now finding beneath the stones, inside the stones, and around the stones is so far beyond what anyone expected that even the researchers running these studies are using words like extraordinary and unprecedented in their own papers. This is not a story about magic. This is not a story about aliens. This is a story about what real science is revealing right now, in real time, and it is far more astonishing than any legend ever was. Stay with me to the very end, because the discoveries I am going to walk you through today build on each other. And by the time we reach the last one, you are going to understand Stonehenge in a way that the entire world did not understand it just a few years ago. If you are new here, subscribe right now, because this channel breaks down the biggest discoveries in science and history in plain language. No jargon, no filler, just the facts laid out clearly. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. People are joining from all over the world, and I want to hear from you. Now let us start with the discovery that just came out and absolutely changed the game. For generations, scientists thought they had a decent handle on where Stonehenge's stones came from. The big outer stones, called sarsens, were traced to Marlborough Downs in southern England, about 25 miles away. The smaller inner stones, called bluestones, were traced to Wales, roughly 150 miles distant. And sitting flat at the very center of Stonehenge was a massive 6-ton slab of sandstone called the altar stone. For over 100 years, scientists assumed the altar stone also came from Wales, from the same general region as the bluestones. They were wrong. And the correction to that assumption has completely rewritten the story of what Stonehenge actually is. A study published in the journal Nature in 2024, and then followed up by a brand new study from Curtin University, published in June of this year, 2026, in the Journal of Quaternary Science, has now confirmed beyond reasonable doubt that the altar stone did not come from Wales at all. It came from northeast Scotland, specifically from a geological region called the Orcadian Basin, which includes Caithness, the Orkney Islands, and the Moray Firth. The stone was formed from ancient lake sediments in a body of water called Lake Orcadian that existed in that Scottish landscape millions of years ago. And it is sitting right now at the center of Stonehenge, which stands on Salisbury Plain in the south of England. The distance between those two places is 700 kilometers, 435 miles. And the research team confirmed that glaciers did not carry it. There is no viable glacial pathway that could have deposited this stone anywhere near Stonehenge. People moved it. Human beings, 5,000 years ago, moved a 6-ton block of sandstone from the tip of northeast Scotland all the way to the south of England. The research team from Curtin University, working in collaboration with scientists from Sheffield Hallam University, the University of Sheffield, Wessex Archaeology, and the University of Bristol, used a method called mineral grain dating to figure all of this out. They could not chip pieces off the stone itself because Stonehenge is a protected site. So instead, they analyzed tiny mineral fragments from previous excavations. Some of those samples going all the way back to the 1840s. They looked at hundreds of microscopic zircon crystals and matched their chemical signatures to known geological formations across Britain. The match pointed northeast Scotland and only northeast Scotland. And then they ran ice sheet computer models to test whether any glacier during the last ice age could have physically carried the stone south. The model said no. There was simply no path from the Orcadian Basin to Salisbury Plain that a glacier could have traveled. The conclusion is unavoidable. People did this, people planned this, people organized this, people executed this, and they did it 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. Now stop and think about what that actually means. Transporting a 6-ton sandstone block 700 kilometers is not a spontaneous decision. It is not something a small group of people wake up one morning and do. It requires knowing where the stone is, which means knowledge of geology and geography spanning the entire length of Britain. It requires deciding that this particular stone from this particular place is important enough to move. It requires organizing groups of people across massive distances. It requires planning a route, which scientists now believe likely combined overland hauling using sledges and ropes with river and coastal sea travel by boat. And then it requires actually doing it, kilometer by kilometer, probably over weeks or months, with the tools and technology of the Neolithic period. No iron, no wheels, no written plans, just knowledge, coordination, and extraordinary human determination. Dr. Anthony Clark, co-lead author of the June 2026 study, described the findings as suggesting the journey was far from simple and likely required careful planning across multiple stages. That is scientific language for something that, when you translate it into plain terms, should genuinely take your breath away. These were not primitive people. These were not simple farmers stumbling around in the dark. These were sophisticated, organized human beings with a level of social coordination and long-distance communication that we did not give them credit for. And they built one of the most enduring structures in human history to prove it. But here is the question that scientists cannot fully answer yet. And it is the question that makes this discovery so compelling. Why that stone? Why travel 700 kilometers to get this specific piece of sandstone from northeast Scotland when there are perfectly good stones available much closer to Salisbury Plain? The researchers believe the answer is not practical at all. It is symbolic. It is cultural. It is spiritual. The altar stone occupies the most central position in all of Stonehenge. It lies flat at the geometric heart of the entire monument. If you stand at the center of Stonehenge on the morning of the summer solstice, the altar stone is directly beneath your feet. Whatever ceremony, whatever ritual, whatever meaning Stonehenge was built to hold, the altar stone was at the center of it, and the people who built this place chose to travel further than any other known stone transport in prehistoric Britain to place it there. That tells you something enormous about how much it mattered. And this brings us to the second discovery that is changing everything, because scientists are not just finding new things about the stones that are already visible. They are finding things underground that have been completely invisible for thousands of years. And what they have found is raising an equally enormous question about what was actually happening in this landscape. In November of 2025, researchers from the University of Bradford, working as part of the International Stonehenge Hidden Landscapes Project, published a study in the journal Internet Archaeology that confirmed something truly remarkable near a site called Durrington Walls, which sits about 2 miles north of Stonehenge itself. A ring of massive pits had first been detected in 2020 using ground-penetrating radar and other remote sensing technology. At the time, everyone could see that these pits formed a circle, but nobody knew whether they were natural geological features or something humans had made. The new research answered that question definitively. The pits are human-made, every single one of them. Deliberately dug by Neolithic people around 4,500 years ago, right around the same period that Durrington Walls itself was being built. Here is the scale of what we are talking about. The ring of pits stretches over 2 kilometers wide, 2 full kilometers. It encloses an area greater than 3 square kilometers around Durrington Walls and a nearby site called Woodhenge. Each individual pit measures up to 10 meters across and up to 7 meters deep, 30 feet wide, 23 feet deep. Imagine standing at the bottom of one of these pits. The walls of the pit would be over the head of a 3-story building above you, and there are at least 16 of them confirmed so far, arranged in a near-perfect circle across the landscape. The University of Bradford's lead archaeologist, Professor Vince Gaffney, described this structure as without precedent within the UK. He said these features were not simply dug and abandoned. They were part of a structured monumental landscape that speaks to the complexity and sophistication of Neolithic society. The largest known prehistoric structure in Britain is not Stonehenge. It is this hidden ring of colossal pits surrounding Durrington Walls right next door to it. The research team used techniques that would have seemed like science fiction to earlier generations of archaeologists. They used optically stimulated luminescence dating, which measures the last time mineral grains in the sediment were exposed to light, to confirm the age of the pits. They used environmental DNA from the sediment inside the pits, called cDNA, to identify which plants and animals lived in the surrounding landscape when the pits were in use. The geochemical signatures found inside the sediment of each pit were remarkably consistent from pit to pit, which tells scientists that all of these pits were dug as part of a single, unified, deliberately planned construction effort. This was not a random collection of holes dug by different groups over different centuries. This was a coordinated project on a massive scale. What were the pits for? Archaeologists now believe they likely marked a sacred boundary. They may have served as a kind of outer perimeter of a vast ceremonial landscape, separating the sacred space of Durrington Walls from the ordinary world outside it. They echo what researchers describe as cosmological ideas, beliefs about the structure of the universe and humanity's place within it, that shaped everything about how this entire landscape was designed. And that word, landscape, is the key shift in how modern science is now thinking about Stonehenge. Because here is what the totality of these discoveries is telling us. Stonehenge was never just a stone circle standing alone in a field. It was one piece, probably the central and most important piece, of a vast, deliberately designed sacred landscape covering many square kilometers of what is now Wiltshire in southern England. A landscape of monuments, pits, burial mounds, processional pathways, and ceremonial sites that together made up one of the most intentional and complex ritual environments ever created by prehistoric humans anywhere on Earth. The Stonehenge Hidden Landscapes Project an international collaboration led by the University of Birmingham and the Ludwig Boltzmann Institute for Archaeological Prospection and Virtual Archaeology in Vienna, with partners from multiple British universities, has been scanning the ground around Stonehenge for years with technology including ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, and three-dimensional laser imaging. What they have found underground is an entire buried world. Burial mounds that have been completely flattened and invisible at the surface for centuries turned out to still be perfectly preserved just below the topsoil. Wooden buildings, the post holes of enormous timber structures, were found inside the Stonehenge enclosure, suggesting the site was active and inhabited long before the standing stones were raised. Processional avenues and pathways cut deliberately through the landscape. And monument after monument, site after site, all carefully positioned relative to Stonehenge in ways that reflect deep astronomical and geographical knowledge. Now let us talk about the bluestone mystery, because that one also just got a major scientific update in 2026 that changes a debate that has been running for over a century. The smaller stones of Stonehenge, the bluestones that form the inner oval and the inner circle, have long been known to come from the Preseli Hills in Wales, about 150 miles away. But for a long time, scientists were split on how they got to Salisbury Plain. One school of thought said humans carried them. Another school of thought argued that glaciers during the last ice age could have transported them naturally, carrying them as the ice sheets advanced and retreated across Britain thousands of years before Stonehenge was even built. In January 2026, scientists from Curtin University published a study that used advanced mineral fingerprinting to look for evidence of this glacial transport theory in the river sediments near Stonehenge. If glaciers had carried the bluestones south from Wales, those glaciers would have also deposited thousands of other mineral fragments from that same Welsh geology all along the route. Those fragments would still be traceable in the river sediments today, preserved like geological fingerprints. The team examined more than 500 zircon crystals from rivers near Salisbury Plain using instruments at Curtin's John de Later Center. They found no evidence of Welsh glacial debris in the expected locations. None. The results strongly support the conclusion that ancient humans, not glaciers, transported the bluestones over 150 miles from Wales to Stonehenge. And this connects directly to an earlier discovery about a site in Wales called Wan Mawn in the Preseli Hills. Archaeologists excavating Wan Mawn found empty holes arranged in a circle, holes that matched the exact dimensions of the Stonehenge bluestones. What they had found were the former standing positions of a stone circle that was built at Wan Mawn and then taken apart. The stones were removed, transported east, and re-erected at Stonehenge. The bluestones were not simply quarried and shipped. They were taken from an existing monument that already carried meaning and history and spiritual significance for the people who built it. They were brought to Salisbury Plain and incorporated into the new, larger monument being created there. Stonehenge inherited the sacred history of Wan Mawn. It was built with stones that were already ancient and already meaningful when they arrived. This is a completely different story from the one most people grew up with. Stonehenge was not a single project built by one group of people in one time period. It was a monument that accumulated meaning and stones and significance over centuries from multiple different directions, from Wales and from Scotland and from southern England, drawing in materials that were already sacred from places that were already important. The people who built it were not building a local monument. They were building a monument for all of Britain. Now here's the scientific question that ties all of this together, and it is the one that researchers are pressing hardest on right now. How did Neolithic people who had no metal, no wheels, no writing, no engines, build the communication and coordination networks required to pull this off? Because what the evidence demands is not just physical strength. It demands that communities in Scotland and communities in Wales and communities in southern England were in active, sustained contact with each other. They knew about each other. They shared ideas. They shared beliefs. They may have shared a common religious or cosmological worldview that made moving a 6-ton stone 700 kilometers feel like the right and necessary thing to do, not an absurd impossibility. And this picture of prehistoric Britain as a connected, communicating, sophisticated society is the most radical shift in understanding that modern science has produced. The old story said that Neolithic people lived in small, isolated local groups. They farmed and hunted near where they were born and died. They did not have the organizational capacity for large-scale projects. That story is now definitively dead. The evidence from Stonehenge alone has killed it. You cannot move a 6-ton stone from Scotland to England without a network. You cannot build the largest prehistoric structure in Britain, a 2-kilometer ring of giant pits, without a unified design and a coordinated workforce. You cannot quarry and transport bluestones from Wales, dismantle a stone circle that was already standing there, and rebuild it at Stonehenge without people in Wales and people in England working together toward a shared purpose. These things happened. The science proves they happened. And the story of who built Stonehenge is now the story of an entire civilization spread across the entire island of Britain, connected by beliefs and ambitions that were far larger than any single community could hold on its own. What did they believe? What was Stonehenge actually for? The honest scientific answer is that we do not know everything, but we know more than ever before. We know that Stonehenge functioned as a solar calendar. A professor from Bournemouth University demonstrated that the arrangement of the 30 large sarsen stones in the outer circle, grouped into sets representing days, weeks, and months, encodes a 365.25-day solar year. The monument tracked the sun with precision. It told the people who used it when to plant, when to harvest, when the great seasonal turning points of the year were arriving. The summer solstice alignment, when the rising sun strikes the heel stone and sends a shaft of light directly to the center of the monument, was not accidental. It was engineered. We know that Stonehenge was a place of the dead. Thousands of cremated human remains have been found at the site, spanning centuries of use. People brought their dead from far away to be buried here. Isotope analysis of the bones shows that some of the dead came from Wales, almost certainly the same region where the bluestones originated. The stones and the people traveled the same routes. They were brought together at Stonehenge and placed together in the ground. We know that sound mattered at Stonehenge. Researchers from the University of Salford built a precise acoustic scale model of the monument and discovered that the stone circle creates a powerful acoustic environment. Sound is amplified inside the circle, while simultaneously being blocked from reaching outside. People standing inside Stonehenge could hear voices and music with remarkable clarity. People standing outside could barely hear anything. The stones created an acoustic chamber for ceremony and ritual, a place where the human voice and musical instruments would have resonated in ways that felt supernatural to the people experiencing it. And we know that Stonehenge was not finished and then abandoned. It was built in stages over more than 1,000 years, from approximately 3000 BCE to around 1500 BCE. Each generation added to it, rearranged parts of it, incorporated new stones from new places, refined and expanded the design. This was not a project. It was an institution, a living, breathing sacred site that communities returned to and invested in across dozens of generations. The people who completed Stonehenge had great-great-great-great-grandparents who had begun it, and they kept building. The discoveries being made right now in 2025 and 2026 are not footnotes to the story of Stonehenge. They are the story of Stonehenge, the fact that a 6-ton stone was transported 700 kilometers across Britain, the fact that the largest prehistoric structure in Britain is a hidden ring of colossal pits that has been buried and invisible for 4,000 years until radar found it. The fact that the bluestones were taken from a previous stone circle that was deliberately dismantled to build something bigger and more permanent. All of this tells us that the people who built Stonehenge were operating on a scale of ambition and capability that dwarfs what anyone previously imagined. They were not building a monument for their village. They were building something they believed would matter forever. And they were right. Because 4,500 years later, we are still here, still asking questions, still scanning the ground with radar and analyzing crystals with instruments the size of rooms, still trying to understand what they were thinking and what they knew and what they built and why. The stones are still standing. The mystery is not smaller than it used to be. It is larger. Every answer that science produces reveals 10 new questions waiting underneath it. That is what great science does. That is what great monuments do. They outlast every explanation and demand new ones from every generation that comes to stand in front of them. If this kind of deep, evidence-based storytelling about the ancient world is something you want more of, share this video right now with someone who loves history and science. It takes 5 seconds, and it helps this channel bring you more of exactly this. Leave a comment below telling me what part of this story hit you hardest. Was it the 700-kilometer journey of the altar stone? The ring of giant pits hiding underground for thousands of years? The idea that Stonehenge was built not by one people, but by an entire connected civilization spread across the whole of Britain? Tell me what got you. And I will be here with the next discovery the moment it breaks. See you in the next one.